upon the many, upon the body of this nation, for whose benefit the Constitution was made. But they will meet a response from the few whom it entirely overlooks or sees but to trample upon, and the fewer still who identify themselves with the outcast by occupying this position of a dissolution of their union with slaveholders. It does very well for 9/10 of the people of the United States to speak of the awe and reverence they feel as they contemplate the Constitution. But there are those who look upon it with a very different feeling, for they are in a very different position. What is it to them that it talks about peace, tranquility, domestic enjoyments, civil rights? To them, it is no such union, and resting as it does upon all their dearest and holiest rights. I cannot but express surprise that there are so many to wonder that they and those who feel with them should look upon this union as one that ought to be dissolved. Oh, sir, look at them as they are falling, generation after generation, beneath the sway of the union, sinking into their ignominious graves. Unwept, uncared for, unprayed for, enslaved, and say, what has the union been to them that they should look upon it with filial reverence? There was McIntosh of St. Louis. He raised his dark, fettered hand in defense of the chastity of his wife, as it is claimed that a white man ought to do. And he was burned in a slow fire. What was the union to him? What was it to Turner, Nat Turner of Southampton, than whom a nobler soul has never risen upon the human race in all the long line of its prophets and its heroes? The union does not even preserve his name. He had no place in life under its protecting aegis. In history, he is only Nat Turner, the miserable Negro.
I will never contemptuously call him Nat Turner. For had he been a white man, Massachusetts and Virginia would have united to glorify his name and to build his monument. And it is strange seeing all these things that I should feel them too and act upon the feeling. Yet when such thoughts as these get such imperfect utterance as I am able to give them, men say to me, Raymond, you're wild. Raymond, you're mad. Raymond, you're a revolutionist. Sir, in all these things, ought not this whole assembly, this whole nation to be revolutionists too? I belong to that class of persons called women's rights men. And I look upon this matter in the light of my principles on that subject. Do you not all recollect the case of the woman in Maryland, which went the round of the papers not long since? She was endeavoring to make her escape to the land of Victoria. She was pursued and overtaken and was about to be returned to her home of whips and chains and fetters and of the American Constitution. she sprang into the Potomac and sank from the clutch of her pursuers. As her condition was, then stands that of 1 million of American women today. And when she was seized, I well remember that it was pleaded in favor of her savage pursuers that by the provisions of the American Constitution, she must be returned, that all their proceedings were legal. What if the word slave is not in it? It does not matter to me nor mine. Slavery was the understanding that framed it. Slavery is the will that administers it. If there were nothing but liberty in it, would there be 2.5 million ground to the dust beneath it to this day? If any authority besides this fact were needed, I might cite the words of John Quincy Adams to the people of color when he applied to him in the case of Latimer. He said his opinion should be forthcoming, subject to the provisions of the American Constitution. With all my knowledge of the origin and the progress and my experience of the present practical workings of the American Constitution, shall I be found here advocating it as a glorious means to a glorious end? No, my fellow countrymen, I am here to register my testimony against it, not because I do not feel how valuable it might be, were its provisions secured to the few as they are to the many, not because I wish to claim anything more for the few than an equality of privileges. Not because I am not ready to yield everything to the Union, but truth, honor, and liberty. But because, and I regret to say it, we have as a people yielded even these. And with such a people, I feel that I must not as an individual be numbered. I have spoken of particular instances in illustration of the nullity of the Union. How is it with every colored man and woman in Boston? Can one of you plead its provisions at the South? No, it will be with you there, even as it was with Nat Turner and the fugitive of the Potomac. If I am wronged, I may appeal. And I may go on appealing and appealing until I am gray-headed and vain. Go the rounds of the Union and tell me at what tribunal the man of color can have justice. Court, judge, jury, all are against him. And to what is it owing? Why? As an honest Buckeye, for he was fond of calling himself so, told me in Cincinnati, it is this everlasting yielding to slavery, which always must take place when freedom yields the first step by coming into union with it. If the Union had been formed upon the supposition that the colored man was a man, he would have been considered, whether in Hampshire or Kentucky. But under the Union, as it was and as it is, he is kicked, stoned, insulted, enslaved, and the public sentiment that does it falls back upon the Constitution for support and will turn its back upon you, whether you may be if you deny that instrument to the obligatory as the paramount law. I need not say how greatly I am troubled whenever a difference of opinion exists in the minds of those people who love the cause of freedom. I have tried in my own mind to make out a case for those who do not see eye to eye with us in this matter. But the more I have labored in it, the stronger becomes my conviction of duty and calling for a dissolution of the union between freedom and slavery. I speak after long thought, free and full discussion, and the clearest view of all the consequences and all the obstacles. I have taken all things into consideration, and in view of each and all of them, I can say here, as I did in New York, that if I can only sustain the Constitution by sustaining slavery, then live or die, sink or swim, survive or perish, I give my voice for the dissolution of the Union. Charles Lennox Raymond, 1844.
Meet Beatrice Morrow Kennedy, born January 9th, 1890, a renowned civil rights advocate in early 20th century Oregon. She was editor of The Advocate, the state's largest African-American newspaper. She was the co-founder and vice president of the Portland, Oregon chapter of the NAACP. The second oldest daughter of George Morrow and Mary Frances Carter Morrow, farmers who raised their children to value education. Beatrice graduated from Wiley College. They had 12 surviving children, 11 daughters and 1 son. Morrow enjoyed singing from an early age. As a young woman, she moved to Chicago to study music with conductor David Clippinger. In June 1912, Beatrice Morrow married Edward Daniel Kennedy. He was the co-founder of The Advocate, one of Portland, Oregon's first Black-owned newspapers. The two had written to each other while Morrow was living in Chicago. Upon moving to Portland, Kennedy became associate editor of The Advocate. Her work through the newspaper drew attention to racial violence during the early 1920s and prompted a statement from Governor Ben W. Olcott decrying the actions of the Ku Klux Klan, which was spreading through Oregon at the time. In addition to her editorial work, Kennedy helped to establish the Portland chapter of the NAACP in 1913. This organization marked the first such branch of the organization formed west of the Mississippi River and continues to actively participate in the Portland community. Acting as the chapter secretary, Kennedy worked with the group to remove racist, exclusionary language from Oregon's Constitution, a mission which succeeded in 1926 and 1927 when the changes were ratified. Kennedy also led protests against Ku Klux Klan propaganda film, The Birth of a Nation. Kennedy's involvement with the Baha'i faith can be dated to 1914, 1915, though the Mangun biography dates her official affiliation to 1928. Apparently, the earliest available membership roll call of membership in Portland. Kennedy graduated from Northwestern College of Law in 1922, making her the first Black woman to graduate from law school in Oregon. She went on to become the first Black woman to practice law in Oregon. A Republican, she was the first Black woman to run for state representative. Kennedy successfully advocated for the passage of a civil rights bill by the Oregon State Legislature. Her efforts helped integrate public schools in Longview, Washington, and Vernonia, Oregon. In 1927, Kennedy represented Oregon at the 4th Annual Pan-African Congress in New York City.